Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. It is Thursday, September 15th, 2022, and welcome to Artist Dream Life Sessions. Today we are talking about point number 4, which is discipline. And it's actually going hand in hand with point number 3, which is what I shared last week, and that is honoring our natural creative flow. Before we get into it though, I'm going to overview all 8 foundational pillars for those of you that are just joining us as an overview, so you can know that I'm basically sharing all 8 points of the artist workshop that I shared back in April in 2022 on my Instagram. I also have this uploaded on YouTube, so you can find me in both places and you can watch the video, and I hope it blesses you. But here we go. So point number 1 of these 8 foundational pillars, which I believe are what it takes to create the artist dream life that we all envision for ourselves, and it is to know without a doubt you are going to come across obstacles as you try and move into full-time creative work, because the reality is that we have a purpose, a calling, and an assignment, and there is going to be obstacles when you're trying to move into living your dream life. So knowing this from the get-go sets you up for success, because you can gird yourself, you can prepare yourself mentally, emotionally, and physically for anything that's going to come against you to try and discourage and deter you from going into the life that you envision for yourself. So number 2 is to know your vision. I've shared on vision a lot, actually, because this is your starting point. Your vision is the blueprint for your life, and is actually the blueprint for your dream life. So once you know this is why I'm here, this is what I'm called to do, there is nothing that's going to get in your way. And knowing this first sets you up for the rest. Okay, number 3 is to honor your natural creative flow, which I shared about last week in depth. And actually I've shared point number 2 in depth as well. That was actually our first Dream Life session, so I encourage you to watch that as well. Number 4 is discipline, which is what we're going to get into today. And discipline, as I mentioned just a moment ago, goes hand in hand with honoring our natural creative flow. In fact, we need both to be successful moving into number 5, which is our 5 essential building blocks to creating your work. Okay, and these are: number 1, creating; number 2, producing; number 3, publishing; number 4, marketing; and number 5, income. In the workshop, I got into a little bit of detail on all 5 of these, and I'm actually going to do a session on all 5 of these coming up probably next week, so be on the lookout for that. Number 6 is just distribution, publishing, copyrights, and ownership. Number 7 is income and revenue. And number 8 is enjoying the fruit of your labor, which is super vital and important to enjoy the journey along the way. Even those seasons where it feels fruitless, it feels like nothing's going right, because it's important that we remember what we're here for and why we're doing it. So that's point number 8. And now let's go ahead and get into number 4, which is discipline. And I feel like we're going to be here a little bit because I have a lot to share on this. And I'm also going to probably be pulling from point number 3, because as I mentioned, they go hand in hand. So number 4, discipline. Now, this word might agitate some of us because it is foreign, but we're going to talk about this because it's very important to have a balance between spontaneity and structure. Now, I personally believe that as creatives, and really in general as people, we kind of have 2 extremes of where we operate and function from. And in our creative work, in our creative output, we are either closer to being very spontaneous. Like me, I'm actually very, very improvisational with just about everything. And being rigid and structured to the extreme. So think about this for yourself. Where do you tend to operate from? And if you're somewhere in the middle, then that's wonderful, because that means you have a good balance of the two, and that's where we need to be. So what is, and when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about when you're creating, your natural creative flow, which I mentioned last week, and I'll get into that for just a minute for those of you that don't know what that means. Now, our natural creative flow is basically our creative essence, where creativity comes from personally. Some of us are musicians, some of us are photographers, some of us are visual artists, some of us are bakers. You know, there's so many different types of art. But your natural creative flow is how things naturally come out for you. And again, I encourage you to watch the video, because I did share a lot on this, and it's very important to know self, both broken self and whole self, so that you can be completely immersed in the genuineness of creative flow. Okay, so when I talk about discipline, I'm talking about putting structure around your natural creative flow. Now, this is, as I mentioned a moment ago, it can be a challenge. If you tend to be someone who is very, very spontaneous, then you need to make and take time and effort to discipline yourself. So I'm going to talk about some ways that you can do this if you do struggle on that end. Now, if you're on the other extreme and you're very rigid, it's very likely that you probably don't allow for natural creative flow to function at its peak. So as you can see, both ends need to learn from each other. So think about this for a moment and decide where you fall in between these two. Okay, now so discipline is scheduling, it is planning, and it is consistency. Now, there's another aspect of this that's very important, especially when you have seasons that you're not seeing fruit in your work. Consistency and diligence is key to bringing all of this together, okay? As I mentioned in point number 5, part of producing, which is 2 in the 5 essential building blocks, part of producing is discipline. Okay, now if you're somebody, as I said, who doesn't function well with this, then you're going to need to have a planner. You're going to need to learn how to organize your time. And so once you have, now of course this depends on where you are, because as I mentioned before, we're all in different parts in this journey. Some of us are doing our creative work part-time, and some of us are doing it full-time, and some of us are in the transition from one to the other. So, but it is important to honor the natural creative flow, whichever area you're at, and it's important to put structure around the creative flow with being disciplined in how you put it together, and disciplined in continuing your work in spite of as I said, the first one, which is obstacles that are going to come against us. Now, I'm sitting here, literally live testimony in transition. I have had a major life transition, and I have been putting together my dream life vision for what I want to do and what I feel I'm called to do. And I've had many obstacles come against me in all shapes and sizes, that if I'm not careful, I can very easily fall into being discouraged, losing sight of my vision, losing sight of the direction that I feel I'm supposed to go, and throw in the towel and essentially give up on what I know I'm supposed to be doing because of the obstacles and because of not seeing the fruit that I'm hoping to see. But I'm here literally, as I said, live testimony, encouraging you that you can do this, and it does require discipline. Now, the other aspect of discipline, there's obviously the practical discipline, which is to have a schedule. I'm a planner. I like, and I'm old school planner. I like writing stuff down. But some of us are not. So this might require you to take some time to learn how to do this. But scheduling time and scheduling resources, whatever you need to help you in your craft, whether it's taking classes to polish up your skills, or being around like-minded people, whatever it takes for you to stay in that realm that's going to encourage you to continue your work is what you need to do, and what's going to help you to stay in this space of discipline to bring that structure to your creative work. Okay? And it's very hard for me not to talk about these 5 essential building blocks, because all of this ties in together. So producing is the second one, which is kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about first creating what we're creating, whatever medium it is that we do, and then producing it. And bringing that into production is the discipline part. Okay? So the other part of discipline is the invisible part of discipline. Okay? That is disciplining our mind to stay encouraged and to stay focused, and to stay steadfast, because as I said, you're going to have opposition. It's just part of life. And especially, as I said, if you know what you're called to do, you're going to have a lot of opposition trying to get you off course, because when you know what you're called to do, you're going to bless so many people. And we have an enemy who doesn't want that to happen. So staying in this space of disciplining our mind to continue our path, continue our journey in spite of the obstacles, in spite of naysayers, in spite of anything and everything that's going to try and throw you off course. So mentally, and how do we do this? I actually shared on my soul strengthening sessions, which I encourage you to watch as well, because I teach on strengthening your soul and understanding how the soul works, understanding the brokenness of the soul, and understanding how to bring soul into a space of restoration. So this is all interconnected. I mean, we create from the essence of self, so the strength of self is going to impact and flow into our creative work. So discipline your mind to stay in a space of being encouraged. Even, I'm saying this very, very boldly in live testimony, even if you're the only one encouraging yourself to keep going in the direction you know you're called to do and called to be in, okay? Disciplining our emotions, okay? Now, what am I talking about here? I'm talking about the soul. I'm talking about the inner being. Disciplining our spirit to stay in a space of peace in spite of the chaos, in spite of things not going the way we planned or hoped. Because again, this is all interconnected. So keeping your spirit strengthened and sound, keeping your mind strengthened and sound, keeping your emotions strengthened and sound, and obviously keeping our body strengthened and sound. Now, all of this requires diligence and structure and planning and scheduling and consistency. Okay? Now, I'm thinking about soul strengthening sessions because a lot of what I'm sharing right now, I've actually shared and just recently shared in those other classes, which I encourage you to watch. Again, you can find those on Instagram and on She's Restored YouTube channel. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so we wrap our structure around our natural creative flow. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that once you, let's say you're a writer, okay, and now I will say with writing, it's actually very easy to release that creativity because you can simply grab something to write with and a little piece of paper and jot stuff down. Other art forms are a little more challenging to do that, especially if you're at work or something. But to keep it simple and to keep it very, very obvious, a writer can simply write whatever comes to mind and heart, and it's recorded. Okay, this is part of the natural essence of a creative writer. Now, when I'm talking about that natural creative flow, anytime you feel inspired to write, you write. I personally believe that early in the day, because we have rested hopefully well the night before, our minds are more clear. Our perspective is more solid and sound, and therefore creative flow should naturally come to us. But as I said, for some of us that are working in a different field and we have to be honoring to the work that we have, and we don't really necessarily have the liberty to just be creative whenever we want to. It's probably a little more challenging, but you can still channel that creativity and honor it, okay? Because that is the truest form of your creative self, which is going to bless whoever is going to receive it, okay? So having that creative flow and then putting structure around it. So the structure is the discipline. And this is also pouring into in the 5 essential building blocks, number 3, which is publishing. I think I shared in the workshop that this tends to be where we get discouraged the most and possibly even want to quit what we're doing because we don't see, as I mentioned earlier, we don't see the fruit, we don't see the reward, we don't see the payoff and the benefit of what we're doing. And this is where we have to remind ourselves that I am doing what I'm supposed to do, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take effort, and it's going to take discipline. Okay, so let's see. I don't normally share this during these sessions, but I feel like for this one, I'm gonna leave you with a couple of questions to answer for yourself when it comes to discipline, okay? Where do you tend to go? Are you someone who is super rigid and structured and Or are you someone who is super spontaneous? Okay? Now, depending on how you answered this, I'm going to ask you a second question that I want you to ponder this week, and that is, what are some things I can do to have a teachable spirit to learn how to be less rigid or more spontaneous? Because we need both. We need to find the balance between both. Now, as I said earlier, I am super ridiculously improvisational. I mean, just about everything. So I have to work at keeping things organized, which is why my planner is so important to me. It helps me stay focused and helps me know what I'm supposed to be doing when I remember to look at it. But even that, I have to remember that I have to stay on task. As a choreographer and actually as an improv movement artist, it takes discipline for me to choreograph a piece of music or a sequence of movement, because my natural way is to just flow whatever comes when I listen to music. Now, I personally know, and I'm a ridiculous music enthusiast, but when I listen to a song that I feel inspired to choreograph, because of how my mind and my spirit flows when I listen to music, I can literally choreograph 500 different things 500 times I hear a piece of music, because that's how I naturally create. So when I need to choreograph a piece of or a dance sequence, or I need to choreograph an entire song, for example, when I was teaching in the studio and I had students and I had to choreograph for performances, I had to discipline myself to, every time I listened to, minute 1 and 3 seconds, it's going to be the same movement that it was last time. So what is this for you? If you are someone who is very improvisational, what does this look like in your work? And how can you learn to have more discipline and structure to get your work into production and then get it into publishing and marketing and obviously revenue, which is what our hope is, to have our dream life and make money doing what we love to do. If you are very structured, as I said earlier, then you need to learn how to allow spontaneity to come in when you're creating, because that is going to be the truest, most amazing version of yourself, is to let creativity flow naturally, and still having the blessing and the benefit of having that discipline wrapped around it, that structure wrapped around it, so that we can get our workout, whatever that is. Okay, so I hope this has blessed you. Please feel free to message me or leave any comments on this video or any of the videos, and I hope to be back next week. I'm going to talk about the 5 essential building blocks to building your dream life as an artist. I hope y'all are doing well. I love y'all so much, and I will talk to you soon.